Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Hara, and thanks for listening. In this episode, I will be talking about FINTRAC because FINTRAC released their annual report this week. FINTRAC is the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada. So don't let the long name scare you off. We're going to break it down, go through the report, and go through some of the history about FINTRAC and why it exists. So starting with the basics, FINTRAC is like the watchdog of Canada's financial system. Its job is to sniff out anything fishy. It's actually one of 13 federal departments and agencies that play a role in Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing. And it's led by the Department of Finance Canada. So its main role is to detect, prevent, and deter money laundering and terrorist financing activities. It ensures the protection of personal information under its control and operates independently from other legal authorities. The motivation dates back to around 1989 when a group called the Financial Action Task Force on Money Laundering, the FAT, was established. It's a intergovernmental organization with countries within the G7 to develop policies to combat money laundering. FINTRAC was created on July 5th, 2000, under the Proceeds of Crime Money Laundering Act that was set up by the federal government. The primary reason was to help with the detection and investigation of money laundering activities. So July 2000. What happened after September 11th attacks in 2001? So the act was amended to include terrorist activity financing, and that expanded its scope to also address those threats related to terrorist financing. In 2006, under the federal government's Bill C-25, FINTRAC's mandate was expanded to enhance what is done for client identification, record keeping, and reporting measures for not registering. Over time, FINTRAC has expanded the range of businesses that it regulates. These now include quite a list. There's financial entities like banks, credit unions, trust companies, loan companies, life insurance companies, brokers and agents, the money services businesses like currency exchange services, money transfer services, check cashing businesses, securities dealers, brokers and dealers in securities. The one we're most familiar with is real estate brokers, real estate agents, and the developers. They also regulate dealers in precious metals and stones. And this may or may not surprise you, casinos and gambling establishments. This year, they started regulating armored cars. So the companies that provide armored car services and the businesses that move money, move cash around. Also this year, they started regulating mortgage administrators and brokers. They also regulate the accountants and accounting firms and notaries, and also lawyers who provide services that could be exploited for money laundering. Of course, as crime and organized crime and so on goes on, they continually try to find ways to get around any roadblocks. FINTRAC is a roadblock, and we can expect FINTRAC's regulatory powers to grow and go into more businesses as they discover ways that people can use these businesses for money laundering and anti-terrorism. FINTRAC reports to the Parliament of Canada through the Minister of Finance. And every 2 years, there is an audit by the Privacy Commissioner of FINTRAC and their activities. Since 2019, the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency and the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians have had oversight into FINTRAC's activities. So they're part of the government and they're monitored by the government. Let's get into the annual report for 23-24. It's packed with some good info. And some of the key highlights they've got is a modernization vision. They're going more digital, creating new tools and systems to make compliance easier for us. So let's get into FINTRAC's annual report for 23-24. It starts out with, of course, FINTRAC's mandate and explains what money laundering is, which is the process used to disguise the source of money or assets derived from criminal activity. And it has three recognized stages. One is placement, which means placing the proceeds of crime into the financial system. Second one is layering, which is converting the proceeds of crime into another form and creating complex layers of financial transactions to disguise the trail and the source of ownership of funds. It isn't just washing money. Although in Canada we can wash our money since it's plastic, it will go through the clothes washer on cold, but don't put it in the dryer because our money melts. That's not what money laundering is. It also involves integration, placing the laundered proceeds back into the economy to create the perception of legitimacy. This is a continuous, ongoing thing with dirty money constantly being introduced into the financial system. They get into what terrorist activity financing is. It's the using of funds, property, or other services to encourage, plan, assist, or engage in acts of terrorism where the primary motivation is not financial gain. The two main differences between terrorist activity and money laundering is that for terrorist activity, funds can be from legitimate sources, not just criminal acts, and money is the means, not the end. And the report says the goal is to use funds to facilitate or implement terrorist activities. Now, what makes up a terrorist is probably a whole separate discussion because various countries designate groups as terrorist groups, but there's no consistent consensus on what a terrorist group is. There's a message from the director and CEO, Sarah Paquette. And in her message, she basically highlights FINTRAC's role in combating money laundering and terrorist financing with all the challenges going on, like evolving technologies and everything happening in the world. And then she touches on some of the achievements over the past year, Operation Hinds, which led to a major cocaine seizure. And she also touches on the importance of FINTRAC's partnership with the federal, provincial, municipal, and international groups to address all of these threats, and acknowledges the dedication of FINTRAC's employees and reiterates the center's commitment to safeguarding Canada's financial system while protecting the privacy of Canadians. That becomes a juggle, protection and privacy. What are some of the highlights of this report? Modernization. They're rolling out new tools and systems to make compliance easier. Being able to file reports and get feedback in real time to help guide us through the regulatory maze. They're upgrading their system to allow businesses to report financial transactions. It means a quicker analysis and response times. They've developed a new API, which stands for Application Programming Interface. Anybody who's built or used anything on the web pretty much has interacted with an API, though you may not know what they are. This has been created for secure system to system submissions of financial transaction reports, and it's streamlining the reporting process, making it easier for businesses to file and, as they say, to fulfill their legal obligations. They're also aiming for more public private partnerships, teaming up with businesses and law enforcement to tackle some of these bigger issues. They've also modernized their reporting forms, those that are used for large cash transactions and virtual currency transactions. They've been updated. They have new fields and better automation to improve the data quality and have more effective analysis. FinTrack is also starting to use generative AI intelligence to create AI powered tools that will assist with tasks like creating documents, text translation, and inquiry responses and going through data. They're also expanding the cloud presence, so they've got a more flexible, secure, and scalable infrastructure so that they can manage the high volume of information that it receives more effectively. Some of the strengths of AI is to be able to go through a very large amount of data very quickly and to identify patterns. So we can assume this means that all the reports that are filed, an AI will go through and identify what could be issues. AI can do this better than humans because they don't go in with necessarily the same bias. FinTrack is also trying to speed everything up to make sure that when something is reported, it's processed quickly. That would be good. Some of us file reports and then wonder, does anybody ever look at this? Does anything ever happen? FinTrack is also doing public-private partnerships where they're teaming up with businesses and law enforcement to tackle some of these issues. These partnerships focus on specific areas like human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, especially online one, romance fraud, trafficking of illicit substances, including fentanyl, which has been incredibly devastating in this country, the illicit cannabis activities, not the licit ones, the illicit ones, and the illegal wildlife trade. One of the projects is Project Protect, which targets human trafficking for sexual exploitation. This project was launched in 2016 by focusing on the financial aspects of these crimes. Its goal is to help businesses in recognizing and reporting suspicious financial transactions relating to the laundering of proceeds from human trafficking. In 2023-24, so last year, Project Protect was expanded to include labor trafficking, aligning with Canada's updated assessment of inherent risks of money laundering and terrorist financing. Project Protect led to nearly 2,000 disclosures that have been key in rescuing victims and preventing new cases of exploitation. Project Protect was set up in 2016. It was inspired by Tamia Nagy Payne, who is an advocate for victims and joined by or led by BMO, and other banks and law enforcement groups have joined in. It generated 147 financial intelligence disclosures last year, 43% of which were proactive, and it assisted with 24 investigations. FinTrack's also been involved with Project Guardian, which is countering the trafficking of fentanyl. And last year, they disclosed 93 unique suspicious transactions, supported 53 law enforcement investigations, 3 with the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team. Through Project Carlos, they had the arrest of 7 individuals involved in a multi-million-dollar drug trafficking operation. 33 charges were laid, and more than $4.5 million worth of drugs, including fentanyl, were seized, along with $1 million in cash. Another project of FinTrack is Project Chameleon, which tackles romance fraud and emergency grandparent scams. This is when somebody will start a relationship with someone, often in a vulnerable position, and persuade them, shall we say, to send them money and to basically rip them off that way. That's romance fraud. And emergency grandparent scams is where a child will message a parent and say something like, "Hey, grandma, it's me. I'm stuck in Spain and I need a lot of money." And in a case in Ontario with FinTrack and others' helps, there was an investigation for somebody who lost $27,000 through an online relationship. Someone was arrested, charges were laid for fraud over $5,000 and possession of property obtained by crime over $5,000. And then in July 2023, the Peel Police, which is in Ontario, working with FINTRAC, had a project they called Project Big Rig, which disrupted a criminal ring and led to the arrest of several people who were stealing tractor trailers and cargo. They ended up arresting 15 people with 73 charges laid and recovered $6,990,000 in stolen cargo and $2,250,000 in stolen tractor trailers. That was Project Big Rig. Project Shadow targets online child sexual exploitation. It's co-led by Scotiabank and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. And this targets funds laundered that are associated with online child sexual abuse. It generated 45 financial intelligence disclosures, 91% of which were proactive based on the suspicious transaction reporting, and 127 unique suspicious transaction reports on 320 subjects of interest, but no direct stats given in there of arrests. Another project is Project Anton, which combats illegal wildlife trade. This is considered a first of its kind international public-private partnership to increase the awareness of illegal wildlife trading. It's also led by Scotiabank, quite a few other groups and international groups. That generated more than 25 disclosures of actionable financial intelligence. And part of that project co-authored a document with the Royal Foundation's United for Wildlife Network, which was founded by Prince William. They co-authored a statement of principles on the critical role of financial intelligence and international collaboration in combating the wildlife trade. Another project is Project Athena. This is combating money laundering in British Columbia and across Canada. And this works closely with Five Eyes. And you're likely wondering, what is Five Eyes? It's an intelligence alliance with 5 English-speaking countries. Along with Canada, there's Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and of course, the United States. It was actually established in 1946, originally to share intelligence among these countries, and over time it's expanded its scope to include a wide variety of intelligence and security matters, including counter cyber threats and global surveillance. FINTRAC's also involved with Project Legion, which combats the laundering of proceeds from illegal cannabis activities. This is led by the TD Bank, various law enforcement agencies. And they do this because illicit cannabis results in a significant loss of tax revenue and can help fund other illegal and harmful activities by organized crime groups. That generated over 60 financial intelligence disclosures last year. And in January of 2024, FINTRAC helped the Sûreté de Québec with an investigation and to break up a network of producers and traffickers who were illegally selling cannabis online. They carried out, it looks like, 70,000 transactions worth about $15 million. 10 people were charged with money laundering and the production, possession, trafficking, and sale of cannabis. July 2023, FINTRAC helped the London Police Service with an operation that was focused on gun violence across London, Ontario. They had 26 search warrants, and police seized 26 guns and $8.5 million worth of drugs: fentanyl, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and OxyContin. 70 people were charged with a combined 550 criminal offenses from this. Throughout the report, there's various sections here about investigations that FINTRAC has been involved with police and crime fighting groups, which you can download the report and read through on your own. I won't get into examples of these. If you ever have the opportunity and you want examples, you can Find somewhere where a rep from FINTRAC is going through their case studies and some of their cases. You can find it pretty fascinating. And if you contact FINTRAC directly, you can get a speaker if you want to bring a speaker into a group to talk about all of these issues. FINTRAC has the authority to issue administrative monetary penalties, they're called, for businesses that are not in compliance with the Act. And they're required to publicly name all persons and entities that receive an administrative monetary penalty. Basically, they can fine them. Businesses that don't follow the rules can be fined, and that information must be made public. So, in a sense, it is a form of public shaming, especially if you consider when a business may make an honest mistake. They forgot or they've left something out. A fine does not mean that there's any wrongdoing going on. That does not mean that the company is directly involved in any money laundering or anti-terrorism financing. It means that they don't have a good procedure in place to show what they did it when they should have done it, and that becomes a violation. And last year they issued the largest administrative monetary penalty. So the most fines, they issued 12 notices of violation for a total of more than $26 million. Imposed 140 penalties across most business sectors since it received the legislative authority to do so in 2008. FINTRAC also works globally with various partners and so on. They ran 3 training sessions related to virtual assets for Pakistan's security. They ran a session on virtual assets for Trinidad and Tobago and also for the Cayman Islands, and led a session on anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing for Nigeria. They've worked with the International Financial Action Strike Team, which FINTRAC is part of, along with its other 5 Eyes partners. They've worked with the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and they helped with the RCMP to run training in the Seychelles. Then FINTRAC also works on the global tax enforcement with authorities from Australia, the Netherlands, the UK, and the United States to increase the collaboration in the fight against tax crime and money laundering. And in 2023, they had a cyber challenge along with the other equivalent departments from each country, and they created or generated dozens of leads with a particular focus for this was on crypto assets, cryptocurrency for tax authorities and law enforcement agencies to investigate. Then they helped with a summit in the Netherlands that's leading to the development of project plans to combat offshore tax evasion, trade fraud, and identity-based crime. FINTRAC is also heavily involved with cryptocurrency. They note in the report that the increase in prices and volumes has made cryptocurrencies a more tempting vehicle for fraud and also a means to transfer ransomware proceeds. And you're probably very familiar with ransomware. Go to your computer one day, everything's frozen, you get a message. If you want your data, you have to send so much in Bitcoin to this number and then at that point, a lot of people are saying, what do I do now? Now, this is something that FINTRAC is battling. And they say that with international trade and financial transactions recovered from the lows that we had in the pandemic a few years ago, that money launderers are seeking to avoid the sanctions placed on Russia and are using trade and service-based money laundering schemes to hide the nature of transnational financial flows. And they state that Bitcoin is the main virtual currency due to it because it's broadly accessible and there's name recognition. But FINTRAC has noted an increase in transactions related to the Ethereum blockchain and stablecoins. They state that Decentralized finance is one of the fastest growing and most innovative sectors of the cryptocurrency economy in Canada and might require greater due diligence. FINTRAC will be concentrating more on cyber currency. There's also concern about crowdfunding. This is where funds are sourced or obtained from a whole network of people on a variety of different crowdsource platforms, that these can be used for violent extremist groups. So small donations, subscriptions, or payments from the wide number of sources can be an important financial base for these groups. And that terrorist groups are known to use international events and conflicts to raise funds. For example, it says that following Hamas's attacks on Israel on the 7th of October 2020, that terrorist organization, including those operating outside of Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, have attempted to raise funds leveraging the reach of social media. FINTRAC is also supporting a talented and dedicated workforce. For example, as mentioned in the report, they're helping their supervisors and managers to have a hybrid work environment and to use best practices. They have an ombuds for workplace wellness. They've partnered with a group, With You, With Me, to identify and grow talent from underrepresented groups and within the FINTRAC's existing workforce. They're also collaborating with Specialist Stern on a neurodiversity initiative that helps with the recruitment and retention of people on the autism spectrum or with similar neurodiversity. They've hired 83 new students and 132 returning students. And FINTRAC has implemented a new employment, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy and action plan. Their goal is talent acquisition and retention, professional growth, leadership, and accountability and employee management. They also have what they state is a rigorous mandatory employment equity, diversity, and inclusion training programs that includes unconscious bias and reconciliation related training. And they have partnerships with the Coalition of Innovation Leaders Against Racism, the Knowledge Circle for Indigenous Inclusion, and the Federal Youth Network. They also include their demographics in here. They have, according to this chart, 513 employees. That's 13. Of that, 55.2% are women, 21.1% are visible minorities, 64.7% their first official language is English, 30% first official language is French. Persons with disabilities, 6.8%, Indigenous, 0.8%. Then they wrap up with their budget. They've given the numbers 2021 22, in 22 23, and then last year 2023 2024. So salaries, employee benefit plans, operations and maintenance, and their total approved budget. So in 2021-22, salaries was 47.5 million with a total budget of 90.3 million. And last year, salaries made 65 million. Inflation, cost of living, and so on, we can assume. And operations and maintenance was 45.7 million, so giving FINTRAC a budget of $120 million last year. They've also got a case study in here it's an annex to it on Project Protect. They include in Annex B their financial transaction reports. Large cash transaction reports are submitted to FINTRAC when a business receives $10,000 or more in cash in the course of a single transaction, or two or more, totaling $10,000 within 24 hours by or on behalf of the same individual or entity. This must be the number of reports filed. 2023-24, there were 6. I cannot tell from this if it is dollars because it doesn't state. It just says number. So it must be the number of reports. Large cash transaction reports. Last year, 6,203,220 electronic funds transfer reports. Again, relating to $10,000 or more being sent out of the country in a single or multiple transactions. Reports of that, 41,587,294 electronic funds transfer reports. And then suspicious transaction reports, which certainly people in the real estate industry and many others are very familiar with. And the definition, or what they explain in here, is submitted to FINTRAC for a financial transaction that occurs or is attempted and for which there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the transaction is related to the commission or attempted commission of a money laundering or terrorist activity financing offense. Unlike other reporting, there's no monetary threshold. And they received last year 631,137 suspicious transaction reports. And then there's also various other stats in there. Finally, I thought I'd wrap up with some of the indicators or the red flags, the things to watch for in a business. One is unusual transaction patterns, which could be frequent cash deposits or withdrawals that don't quite line up with a customer's profile or business activity. Large volumes of transactions that aren't consistent with the customer's known income or business operations. Something just doesn't quite seem right. If there's multiple bank accounts used by one individual and often with frequent transfers between them, or transfers to or from accounts in different areas, different geographic areas, without a clear rationale or explanation. There's also third-party transactions, the third one, that are done by individuals on behalf of others, especially when the relationship between the parties is not quite clear or doesn't make sense. When payments made by others for services or goods that are not consistent with typical business practices. There's also the fourth one, employment and residency indicators, payments made to individuals who are listed as unemployed or who have no clear sources of income. Transactions involving individuals or businesses located in high-risk areas known for human trafficking. Another one is the lifestyle and spending discrepancies. So spending patterns that don't fit or match an individual's income, maybe luxury purchases by someone with a low income or an apparent low income. And also another suspicious activity is the preference for using cash over traceable methods like bank transfers or credit card payments. That's my summary of the FINTRAC Annual Report. I'll put a link into this report in the show notes and a link to the FINTRAC website. That wraps up my summary of the FINTRAC Annual Report for last year. This was not meant as a heavy critique or criticism. You can probably find that easier listening to this than going and reading a 44-page report. And that's a wrap.